Hello, this is January the 9th of 2021. My name is Charles Stewart. This is the conference of the Supreme Court of Law for the United States of America. The office of a Supreme Court of Law for the USA is presently vacant. We're filling that vacancy until more popular and lawful authority might claim this vacant office. We believe we've got the right to do this. We'll get into that later. We've got a busy agenda here today, and is our normal mode of procedure. Those of us that aren't big on theology and religion have indulged those of us that are, and we do like to open with a formal petition for prayer. A number of us are quite fanatical about the idea that this is a spiritual battle, and so we like to go through this process. Anyway, if y'all might indulge me a little bit here, I'll go ahead and lead in this ritual that we like to go through. Champion of truth and justice in the universe, the God of Abraham, Yahweh Jehovah of armies, please send your angels with your Holy Spirit to guide and direct us and help us to advance the cause of your kingdom of truth and justice and peace, natural, organic, objective on this earth. That is what we seek. Please help us to achieve those ends. Please help us to comprehend that we need to be building consensus, seeking consensus, and thereunder it is of utmost importance that we attempt to maintain respectful tones and choice of words with everybody that is participating herein. And please help us to, if and when it is necessary, to divide from somebody that's obviously not seeking truth and justice, that we do so in graceful and respectful manners, and hopefully that will not even happen, and that those people will just be staying away from us anyway because they don't even like the spirit of truth and justice that we're radiating here. And hereunder, in the name of your precious Son, Jesus Yeshua, we humbly pray these things.